Hello, and welcome to Bookspot. This time we will continue our reading of Rewards and Fairies by Rudyard Kipling. Una has been listening to a young Miss Philadelphia who seems to hail from the 18th century. And she is complaining that her old nurse, Sissy, stole some silver spoons to give to the local witch master. What's a witch master? A master of witches, of course. I don't believe there are witches, but people say every village has a few, and Jerry was the master of all ours at Mark Lake. He has been a smuggler and a man-of-war's man, and now he pretends to be a carpenter and joiner. He can make almost anything, but he really is a white wizard. He cures people by herbs and charms. He can cure them after Dr. Brake has given them up, and that's why Dr. Brake hates him so. He used to make me my toy carts and charm off my warts when I was a child. Philadelphia spread out her hands with her delicate, shiny little nails. It isn't counted lucky to cross him. He has his ways of getting even with you, they say, but I wasn't afraid of Jerry. I saw him working in his garden, and I leaned out of my saddle and double-thonged him between the shoulders over the hedge. Well, my dear, for the first time since Dad gave him to me, my troubadour, I wish you could see the sweet creature, shied across the road, and I spilled out onto the hedge top, most undignified. Jerry pulled me through to his side and brushed the leaves off me. I was horribly pricked, but I didn't care. Now, Jerry, I said, I'm going to take the hide off you first and send you to Lewes afterward. You well know why. Oh, he said, and he sat down among his beehives. Then I reckon you come about old Sissy's business, my dear. I reckon I just about have, I said. Stand away from these hives. I can't get at you there. That's why I be where I be, he said. You'll excuse me, Miss Phil. I don't hold with being flogged before breakfast at my time of life. He's a huge big man, but he looked so comical squatting among the hives that I know I oughtn't to. I laughed and he laughed. I always laugh at the wrong time. But I soon recovered my dignity, and I said, then give me back what you made poor Sissy steal. Your poor Sissy, he said. She's a hatful of trouble. But you shall have 'em, Miss Phil. They're already put by for you. And would you believe it, the old sinner pulled my 3 silver spoons out of his dirty pocket and polished them on his cuff. Here they be, he says, and he gave them to me just as cool as though I'd come to have my warts charmed. That's the worst of people having known you when you were young. But I preserved my composure. Jerry, I said, what in the world are we to do? If you'd been caught with these things, you would have been hanged. I know it, he said, but they're yours now. But you made my Sissy steal them, I said. That I didn't, he said. Your Sissy, she was picking at me and terrifying me all the day long, and every day for weeks, to put a charm on you, Miss Phil, and take away your little spitty cough. Yes, I knew that. And to make me flesh up, I said. I'm much obliged to you, Jerry, but I'm not one of your pigs. Ah, I reckon she's been talking to you then, he said. Yes, she give me no peace, and being terrified, for I don't hold with old women, I laid a task on her which I thought 'ud silence her. I never reckoned the old scrattle 'ud risk her neck bone at Lewes Seas for your sake, Miss Phil, but she did. She up and stole, I tell you, as cheerful as a tinker. You might have knocked me down with any of them little spoons when she brung 'em to me in her apron. Do you mean to say, then, that you did it to try my poor Sissy? I screamed at him. What else for, dearie? He said. I don't stand in need of hedge stealings. I'm a freeholder with money in the bank, and now I won't trust women no more. Silly old besom. I do believe she'd have stole the squire's big fob watch if I'd required her. Then you're a wicked, wicked old man, I said, and I was so angry that I couldn't help crying, and of course that made him laugh and made me cough. Jerry was in a fearful taking. He picked me up and carried me into his cottage. It's full of foreign curiosities. And he got me something to eat and drink, and he said he'd be hanged by the neck any day if it would please him. He said he'd even tell old Sissy he was sorry. That's a great come-down for a witch-master, you know. I was ashamed of myself for being so silly, and I dabbed my eyes and said the least you can do now is to give poor Sis some sort of charm for me. Yes, that's only fair dealings, he said. You know the names of the 12 apostles, dearie? You say them names one by one before your open window, rain or storm, wet or shine, 5 times a day fasting. But mind you, twixt every name you draw in your breath through your nose, right down to your pretty little toes, as long and as deep as you can. and let it out slow through your pretty little mouth. There's virtue for your cough in those names spoke that way, and I'll give you something you can see, moreover. Here's a stick of maple, which is the warmest tree in the wood." "That's true," Una interrupted. "You can feel it almost as warm as yourself when you touch it." "It's cut 1 inch long for your every year," Jerry said. "That's 16 inches. You set it in your window so that it holds up the sash, and thus you keep it, rain or shine, or wet or fine, day or night. I've said words over it which will have virtue on your complaints." "I haven't any complaints, Jerry," I said. "It's only to please Sissy." "I know that as well as you do, dearie," he said. And that was all that came of my going to give him a flogging. I wonder whether he made poor Troubadour shy when I lashed at him. Jerry has his ways of getting even with people. "I wonder," said Una. "Well, did you try the charm? Did it work?" "What nonsense. I told Rene about it, of course, because he's a doctor. He's going to be a most famous doctor. That's why our doctor hates him. Rene said, 'Oh ho, your Master Gam, he is worth knowing,' and he put up his eyebrows like this. He made a joke of it all. He can see my window from the carpenter's shed where he works, and if ever the maple stick fell down, he pretended to be in a fearful taking till I propped the window up again. He used to ask me whether I had said my apostles properly, and how I took my deep breaths. Oh yes, and the next day, though he had been there ever so many times before, he put on his new hat and paid Jerry Gam a visit of state as a fellow physician. Jerry never guessed Rene was making fun of him, and so he told Rene about the sick people in the village and how he cured them with herbs after Dr. Brake had given them up. Jerry could talk smuggler's French, of course, and I had taught Rene plenty of English, if only he wasn't so shy. They called each other Monsieur Gam and Monsieur Lark, just like gentlemen. I suppose it amused poor Rene. He hasn't much to do except to fiddle about in the carpenter's shop. He's like all the French prisoners, always making knickknacks, and Jerry has a little lathe in his cottage, and so Rene took to being with Jerry much more than I approved of. The hall is so big and empty when Dad's away, and I will not sit with old Amour. She talks so horridly about everyone, especially about Rene. I was rude to Rene, I'm afraid, but I was properly served out for it. One always is. You see, Dad went down to Hastings to pay his respects to the general who commanded the brigade there and to bring him to the hall afterwards. Dad told me he was a very brave soldier from India. He was colonel of Dad's regiment, the 33rd Foot, after Dad left the army, and then he changed his name from Wesley to Wellesley, or else the other way about, and Dad said I was to get out all the silver for him, and I knew that meant a big dinner. So I went down to the sea for early mackerel, and I had such a morning in the kitchen and the storerooms, old Amour nearly cried. However, my dear, I made all my preparations in ample time, but the fish didn't arrive. It never does. And I wanted Rene to ride to Pevensey to bring it himself. He had gone over to Jerry, of course, as he always used, unless I requested his presence beforehand. I can't send for Rene every time I want him. He should be there. Now, don't you ever do what I did, child, because it's in the highest degree unladylike, but one of our woods runs up to Jerry's garden, and if you climb, it's ungenteel, but I can climb like a kitten, there's an old hollow oak just above the pigsty where you can hear and see everything below. Truthfully, I only went to tell Rene about the mackerel, but I saw him and Jerry sitting on the seat playing with wooden toy trumpets. So I slipped into the hollow and choked down my cough and listened. Rene had never shown me any of these trumpets. Trumpets? Aren't you too old for trumpets? Said Una. They weren't real trumpets, because Jerry opened his shirt collar and Rene put one end of his trumpet against Jerry's chest and put his ear to the other. Then Jerry put his trumpet against Rene's chest and listened while Rene breathed and coughed. I was afraid I would cough, too. This Hollywood one is the best, said Jerry. 'Tis wonderful, like hearing a man's soul whisperin' in his innards. But unless I've a buzzin' in my ears, Monsieur Larnac, you make about as much the same kind of noise as old Gaffer Macklin, but not quite so loud as young Copper. It sounds like breakers on a reef, a long way off. Comprenny? Perfectly, said Rene. I drive on the breakers, but before I strike, I shall save hundreds, thousands, millions perhaps by my little trumpets. Now, tell me what sounds the old Gaffer Macklin have made in his chest, and what the young Copper also. Jerry talked for nearly a quarter of an hour about sick people in the village while René asked questions. Then he sighed and said, "You explain very well, Monsieur Gam, but if only I had your opportunities to listen for myself. Do you think these poor people would let me listen to them through my trumpet for a little money? No? René's as poor as a church mouse. They'd kill you, monsieur. It's all I can do to coax them to abide it, and I'm Jerry Gam," said Gary. He's very proud of his attainments. "Then these poor people are alarmed, no?" said René. "They've had it in for me for some time back because of my trying your trumpets on their sick, and I reckon by the talk at the alehouse they won't stand much more. Tom Dunch and some of his kidney are drinking themselves riot ripe when I passed along afternoon. Charms and muttering and bits of red wool and black hens is the way of nature to these fools. But anything that's like to do 'em real service, monsieur, is devil's work by their estimation. If I was you, I'd go home before they come." Jerry spoke quite quietly, and René shrugged his shoulders. "I am a prisoner on parole, Monsieur Gam. I have no home." Now that was unkind of René. He's often told me he looked on England as his home. I suppose it's French politeness. "Then we'll talk of something that matters," said Jerry. "Not to name no names, Monsieur Lanark, but what might be your own opinion of someone who ain't old Gaffer Macklin nor young Copper? Of someone who ain't old Gaffer Macklin nor young Copper. Is that person better or worse?" "Better, for time, that is," said René. He meant for the time being, but I never could teach him some phrases. "I thought so too," said Jerry. "But how about time to come?" René shook his head and then blew his nose. You don't know how odd a man looks blowing his nose when you're sitting directly above him. "I've thought of that too," said Jerry. He rumbled so deep I could scarcely catch. "It don't make much odds to me, because I'm old. But you're young, monsieur, you're young." And he put his hand on René's knee, and René covered it with his hand. I didn't know they were such friends. "Thank you, mon ami," said René. "I am much obliged. Let us return to our crumpet making. But I forget," he stood up. "It appears you received this afternoon." You can see into Gam's Lane from the oak, but the gate opened, and fat little Dr. Brake stumped in, mopping his head, and half a dozen of our people followed him, very drunk. You ought to have seen René bow. He does it beautifully. "A word with you, Laennec," said Brake. "Jerry has been practicing some devilry or other on these poor wretches, and they've asked me to be arbiter." "Whatever that means, I reckon it's safer than asking you to be doctor," said Jerry, and Tom Dunch, one of our carters, laughed. "That ain't right feeling of you, Tom," said Jerry, "seeing how clever Dr. Brake put away your thorn in the flesh last winter." Tom's wife had died at Christmas, though Dr. Brake bled her twice a week. He danced with rage. "That is all beside the mark," he said. "These good people are willing to testify that you've been impudently prying into God's secrets by means of some papistical contrivance which this person," he pointed to poor René, "has furnished you with. Why, here are the things themselves." René was holding a trumpet in his hand. Then all the men talked at once. They said old Gaffer Macklin was dying from stitches in his side where Jerry had put the trumpet. They called it the devil's earpiece, and they said it left round red witch marks on people's skins and dried up their lights and made 'em spit blood and threw 'em into sweats. Terrible things, they said. You never heard such a noise. I took advantage of it to cough. René and Jerry were standing with their backs to the pigsty. Jerry fumbled in his big flap pockets and fished up a pair of pistols. You ought to have seen the men give back when he cocked his. He passed one to René. "Wait, wait," said René. "I will explain to the doctor if he permits." He waved a trumpet at him, and the men at the gate shouted, "Don't touch it, doctor! Don't lay a hand on the thing!" "Come, come," said René. "You are not so big a fool as you pretend, Dr. Brake, no?" Dr. Brake backed toward the gate, watching Jerry's pistol, and René followed him with his trumpet like a nurse trying to amuse a child, and put the ridiculous thing to his ear to show how it was used, and talked of la gloire and la humanité and la science, while Dr. Brake watched Jerry's pistol and swore. I nearly laughed aloud. Now listen, said Rene. This will be monies in your pockets, my dear confrere. You will become rich. Then Dr. Brake said something about adventurers who could not earn an honest living in their own country, creeping into decent houses and taking advantage of gentlemen's confidence to enrich themselves by base intrigues. Rene dropped his absurd trumpet and made one of his best bows. I knew he was angry from the way he rolled his R's. Very good, said he. For that I have much pleasure to kill you now and here. Monsieur Gam, another bow to Jerry, will you please lend him your pistol, or he shall have mine? I give you my word I know not which is best, and if he will choose a second from his friends over there, another bow to our drunken yokels at the gate, we will commence. That's fair enough, said Jerry. Tom Dunch, you owe it to the doctor to be his second. Place your man. No, said Tom, no mixing in gentry's quarrels for me. And he shook his head and went out, and the others followed him. Hold on, said Jerry. You forgot what you set out to do up at the alehouse just now. You was going to search me for witch marks. You was going to duck me in the pond. You was going to drag all my bits of sticks out of my little cottage here. What's the matter with you? Wouldn't you like to be with your old woman tonight, Tom? But they didn't even look back, much less come. They ran to the village alehouse like hares. No matter for these canale, said Rene, buttoning up his coat so as not to show any linen. All gentlemen do that before a duel, Dad tells me, and he's been out 5 times. You shall be his second, Monsieur Gam. Give him the pistol. Dr. Brake took it as if it was red hot, but he said that if Rene resigned his pretensions in certain quarters, he would pass over the matter. Rene bowed deeper than ever. As for that, he said, if you were not the ignorant which you are, you would have known long ago that the subject of your remarks is not for any living man. I don't know what the subject of his remarks might have been, but he spoke in a simply dreadful voice, my dear, and Dr. Brake turned quite white and said Rene was a liar, and then Rene caught him by the throat and choked him black. Well, my dear, as if this wasn't deliciously exciting enough, just exactly at that minute I heard a strange voice on the other side of the hedge say, What's this, Bucksteed? And there was my father and Sir Arthur Wesley on horseback in the lane, and there was Rene kneeling on Dr. Brake, and there was I up in the oak listening with all my ears. I must have leaned forward too much, and the voice gave me such a start that I slipped. I had only time to make one jump onto the pigsty roof, another before the tiles broke, onto the pigsty wall, and then I bounced down into the garden just behind Jerry with my hair full of bark. Imagine the situation. Oh, I can, Una laughed till she nearly fell off the stool. Dad said, Philadelphia, and Sir Arthur Wesley said, Good God. And Jerry put his foot on the pistol Rene had dropped, but Rene was splendid. He never even looked at me. He began to untwist Dr. Breck's neckcloth as he twisted it and asked him if he felt better. What's happened? Said Dad. A fit, said Rene. I fear my confrère has had a fit. Do not be alarmed. He recovers himself. Shall I bleed you a little, my dear doctor? Dr. Brake was very good, too. He said, I am vastly obliged, Monsieur Lenec, but I am restored now. And as he went out the gate, he told Dad it was a syncope, I think. Then Sir Arthur said, Quite right, Bucksteed, not another word. They're both gentlemen. And he took off his cocked hat to Dr. Brake and Rene. But poor Dad wouldn't let well enough alone. He kept saying, Philadelphia, what does all this mean? Well, sir, I said, I've only just come down. As far as I could see, it looked as though Dr. Brake had had a sudden seizure. That was quite true, if you'd seen Rene seize him. Sir Arthur laughed. Not much change there, Bucksteed, he said. She's a lady, a thorough lady. Heaven knows she doesn't look like one, said poor Dad. Go home, Philadelphia. So I went home, my dear. Don't laugh so. Right under Sir Arthur's nose, a most enormous nose, feeling as though I were 12 years old and going to be whipped. Oh, I beg your pardon, child. It's all right, said Una. I'm getting on for 13. I've never been whipped, but I know how you felt. All the same, it must have been funny. Funny. If you'd heard Sir Arthur jerking out, Good gad, Bucksteed, every minute as they rode behind me, and poor Dad saying, Pawn my honor, Arthur, I can't account for it. Oh, how my cheeks tingled when I reached my room. But Sissy had laid out my very best evening dress, the white satin one, vandyked at the bottom with spots of maroon voile, and pearl knots, catching up the drapery on the left shoulder. I had poor mother's lace tucker and her coronet comb. Oh, you lucky, Una murmured. And gloves? French kid, my dear. Philadelphia patted her shoulder. And maroon satin shoes and a maroon and gold crepe fan. That restored my calm. Nice things always do. I wore my hair banded on my forehead with a little curl over the left ear. And when I descended the stairs en grande tenue, old Amour curtsied to me without my having to stop and look at her, which, alas, is too often the case. Sir Arthur highly approved of the dinner, my dear. The mackerel did come in time. We had all the Mark Lake silver out, and he toasted my health and asked me where my little bird's nesting sister was. I know he did it to quiz me. So I looked him straight in the face, my dear, and I said, I always send her to the nursery, Sir Arthur, when I receive guests at Mark Lake Hall. Oh, how clever of you. What did he say? Una cried. He said, not much change there, Bucksteed. Gad, I deserved it. And he toasted me again. They talked about the French and what a shame it was that Sir Arthur only commanded a brigade at Hastings, and he told Dad of a battle in India at a place called Assay. Dad said it was a terrible fight, but Sir Arthur described it as though it had been a whist party, I suppose because a lady was present. Of course, you were the lady. I wish I'd seen you, said Una. I wish you had, child. I had such a triumph after dinner. Renee and Dr. Brake came in. They had quite made up their quarrel and told me they had the highest esteem for each other, and I laughed and said I heard every word of it up in the tree. You never saw two men so frightened in your life, and when I said what was the subject of your remarks, Renee, neither of them knew where to look. Oh, I quizzed them unmercifully. They'd seen me jump off the pigsty roof, remember. But what was the subject of their remarks? Said Una. Oh, Dr. Brake said it was a professional matter, so the laugh was turned on me. I was horribly afraid it might have been something unladylike and indelicate, but that wasn't my triumph. Dad asked me to play on the harp. Between just you and me, child, I had been practicing a new song from London, I don't always live in trees, for weeks, and I gave it to them for a surprise. What was it? Said Una. Sing it. I've given my heart to a flower. Not very difficult fingering, but ravishing sentiment. Philadelphia coughed and cleared her throat. I've a deep voice for my age and size, she explained. Contralto, you know, but it ought to be stronger. And she began, her face all dark against the last of the soft pink sunset. I have given my heart to a flower, though I know it is fading away, though I know it will live but an hour and leave me to mourn its decay. Isn't that touchingly sweet? Then the last verse, I wish I had my harp, dear, goes as low as my register will reach. She drew in her chin and took a deep breath. Ye desolate whirlwinds that rave, I charge you to be good to my dear. She is all that I have, and the time of our parting is near. Beautiful, said Una. And did they like it? Like it? They were overwhelmed. Accable, as Renee says. My dear, if I hadn't seen it, I shouldn't have believed it, that I could have drawn tears, genuine tears, from the eyes of 4 grown men. But I did. Renee simply couldn't endure it. He's all French sensibility. He hid his face and said, Assez, mademoiselle, c'est plus fort que moi, assez. Enough, mademoiselle, that's too much for me, enough. And Sir Arthur blew his nose and said, Good Ged, this is worse than assez, while Dad sat with tears simply running down his cheeks. And what did Dr. Brake do? He got up and pretended to look out the window, but I saw his little fat shoulders jerk as if he had the hiccups. That was a triumph. I never suspected him of sensibility. Oh, I wish I'd been you, said Una, clasping her hands. Puck rustled and rose from the fern, just as a big blundering cockchafer flew smack against Una's cheek. When she'd finished rubbing the place, Mrs. Vincey called to her that Pansy had been fractious, or she would have come along long before to help her strain and pour off. It didn't matter, said Una. I just waited. Is that old Pansy barging about the lower pasture now? No, said Mrs. Vincey, listening. Sounds more like a horse being galloped midland quick through the woods. But there's no road there. I reckon it's one of Gleason's colts loose. Shall I see you up to the house, Miss Una? Gracious, no, thank you. Who's going to hurt me? Said Una, and she put her stool away behind the oak and strolled home through the gaps that old Hobden left open for her. Brookland Road. I was very well pleased with what I knowed, and reckoned myself no fool, till I met with a maid on the Brookland Road that turned me back to school. Low down, where the little green lanterns shine, O maids, I've done with thee all but one, and she can never be mine. 'Twas right in the middest of hot June night, with thunder duntin' around, and I seed her face by the fairy light that beats from off the ground. She only smiled, and she never spoke, she smiled and went away, but when she'd gone my heart was broke, and my wits was clean astray. Oh, stop your ringing and let me be, oh, let me be, oh, Brookland bells, you'll ring old Goodman out of the sea before I wed one else. Old Goodman's farm is rank sea sand, and this was 1,000 year, but I shall turn to rich ploughland before I change my dear. Oh, Fairfield Church is water-bound from autumn to the spring, but it shall turn to high hill ground before my bells do ring. Oh, leave me walk on the Brookland Road in the thunder and warm rain. Oh, leave me look where my love goed, and perhaps I'll see her again. Go low down, where little green lanterns shine. Oh, maids, I've done with thee all but one, and she can never be mine. We'll continue next time.